Hi everybody, what's up? My name's Kat. Welcome to my video. Today we're going to be talking about 7th edition APA formatting. And now before we get started, I just wanted to preface this video by telling you that all of this information is either taken from the APA 7th edition style manual or Purdue OWL. So if you want more specific resources or you want to know or fact check what I'm talking about today, that's where you're going to want to go. Also, just a brief overview of what we are going to be talking about. First, we're going to talk about why APA is then we're going to talk about more like technical changes, like what's actually changing from the 6th edition to the 7th edition. And then I'm going to give you some sample examples to check what we're talking about and check some of your changes to see if you're really taking in what we're talking about today. So let's get started. First of all, why is APA important? Well, there's 3 reasons why APA is important, or any citation format for that matter. One, it helps you stay organized. When you're trying to get your thoughts and information on paper, sometimes it's hard to figure out in what order or how you want to show this to the audience. So a citation format like APA can actually help you stay organized and figure out the best way to share your information. It's also a great way to avoid plagiarism. Typically, that's what you want to do. APA, when done correctly, and I'm gonna again help you learn how to do that today, will give the correct amount of credit to the people who actually did the work that you're citing. So that's super important. And third of all, APA is super important for research papers or papers that are going to be based in any type of citation format, specifically thesis writing. Thesis writing is huge when it comes to APA. You always want to be using whatever citation is proper or suggested for your thesis. But when it comes to APA theses, this is a great resource, and I'm going to talk about how to use it and how to use it properly. So if you're working on a thesis right now that's using APA, I hope I can answer all of your questions. All right, starting with the basics. Some things haven't changed from the 6th edition to the 7th edition, and that includes you're still using 12-point font. You want Times New Roman. You want everything to be double spaced. There should be 1-inch margins left, right, top, bottom. Word doesn't always set 1-inch margins as default, so you always want to double check that. Yeah, that hasn't changed, which is nice. It's less to worry about when you're formatting things. Okay, starting with the title page, we're going to get into some changes now. All right, so the title page is probably what looks the most different from 6th edition to 7th edition, and I'm just going to give you, I'm going to tell you what's changed, what should be on it, and then I'm going to give you an example, and that'll be on the next slide. But first of all, what even goes on the title page? First, the title should be at the top. It should be centered, bold, title case heading. So like words that are longer than 3 letters should be capitalized, depending on the length of your paper. And then underneath that line should be a blank line. And then the author's line goes under that. And then the affiliation of the author, like the university, should go under that. If you have more than one author, you're going to want to list all of their affiliations if they're not the same there. And then your course number, colon, the course name is on the line underneath that. And then the course instructor goes beneath that. And then the due date of the paper itself goes under that. And what's actually different from 6th to 7th edition is the words running head. 7th edition no longer requires you to use the words running head on your title page. You still have the title written in all caps at the top left and the page number on the top right, but you no longer need running head. So this is actually pretty much the only different thing on the title page besides the blank line here. But sometimes professors still like to require it, so if you want to be sure that you're not supposed to use running head, just ask your professor to. But technically the 7th edition does not require it. Okay, so here's an example of a title page in proper 7th edition formatting. You see the title is in bold, it's centered, just like the 6th edition, and then a blank line, the author's name, the author's affiliation, the course number, colon, the course name, and then underneath that is the course instructor, and then underneath the course instructor is the due date. We also see that the title is in all caps on the top left in the header, and the page number, which you can't see but is actually there, is in the top right. So here's an example. If you want to pause your video and look at this, try and figure out what's wrong in this example in terms of citation. Okay, moving on. Here we see what's wrong. The title in the header was not all caps, so that's highlighted in red there. If we look at the course and the course instructor, they were actually in the wrong order. The instructor should be underneath, and the course number is missing here. And we saw in the example that the date was never even listed, so make sure you have that. Moving on to specific headings and papers, yay. So first of all, the title of your paper should still be just like 6th edition. You want it to be centered, bold, and title case heading on the first line of the page once you start your writing. Subheadings, I'm going to go over a bit more later, but just a heads up, they're pretty much the same as the 6th edition, still 12-point font, Times New Roman, that kind of stuff. References, the word references should be capitalized and centered and bolded. Bold is different from the 6th to the 7th edition. Okay, so here's another example. We see that the title is at the beginning of the paper. Before the writing, it's centered, it's bolded. That's what you want. Here's another example. So pause your video here and just think about what's wrong and what's missing from this example. Okay, here we see that the title was never bolded, and it was also in the wrong spacing. It's kind of hard to tell in this one, but once you get here, you can really see how far apart they actually were. There was a difference, so really make sure you double check your spacing before submitting anything in APA format. There was also a missing page number, which is highlighted in red here. Moving on to subheadings. Okay, the first subheading of any paper should pretty much be the same as the title heading. It's going to be bold, centered, title case, and then the text should begin on the line underneath. The second subheading should be pretty much the same, except it's going to be not centered, it's going to be on the left, but still bold and title case heading, and text should begin underneath. The third subheading is the same as the second, except it's italics and bolded, and title case heading and left. And then text begins underneath. Fourth and fifth change a little bit. They are indented as if they were the start of a paragraph. And then they're both going to start with text right after it. So there's going to be whatever subheading it is, period, and then the text should begin on that same line for both the fourth and fifth subheadings. The difference between the fourth and fifth is the fourth is not italics, but the fifth is italics. Okay, so we see an example of the first and second subheadings. The first one is bolded, centered, title case heading, just like it should be. The second one is all the way to the left, still bolded, it's still title case heading, but it's not centered. All right, here's another example if you want to pause the video here and talk about what you see wrong in this example of subheadings. There should be a subheading 1 and a subheading 2. All right, now that you've discussed it, as I'm sure you all did, you can see right away that the first heading is actually correct. That's not wrong, but the second heading was not bolded and it was not all the way to the left as it should be. So let's just look back. We see that it should be all the way to the left and not centered because it is the second heading. All right, moving on to the references page. Probably the most difficult stuff because it's also technical and lots of small details that you got to pay attention to. All right, so first of all, like I already said, references should be centered. It should be at the top of your page. It should be bolded. Bold, again, is different from the 6th to the 7th edition. And then right under references, you should start listing your sources. Usually by last name. It really depends on if you have access to the last name. It depends. So if you have the same author, like the same name, but they're different years, always start with the earliest date. So if you have like Williams 2002 and Williams 2005, always start with Williams 2002 and then go Williams 2005 because 2002 comes before 2005. I think that's clear. I hope it's clear. If there is no author, then you're going to want to use the association of the author. So like the affiliation, like you had to know, like you put on your title page, if that's going to be if you have access to that, that's what you're going to use next. If anonymous is directly listed in your source, like on the source itself as the author, then use anonymous. But if you don't have anonymous, use the title of the source if you don't have the affiliation. Okay, so let me just repeat. Use the last name of the author if that's available. If you don't have that, use association. or anonymous if you have one of those. And if you don't have either of those, then use the title of the source. And that's just going to have a little bit of different formatting. It depends on the title, like where the source is. Like if it's a magazine title, if it's a poem, if it's a book, that's going to change a little bit. You're going to want to reference a APA citation manual just to be safe with those, because it is going to change based on the format of the source. And then whatever you use, whatever word comes first, you're still going to alphabetize that with the rest of your sources. And then just two things that didn't change from the 6th to the 7th edition is you're still going to want a hanging indent, and you're still going to want double spacing. And I'll show you a hanging indent on this next slide. Okay, if we look at the second bit of highlighted text, this is an example of a hanging indent. The first line of your source should be all the way to the left. The second line is where you start indenting. Any line, including the second line and any line after it, should be indented. That's what a hanging indent is. Just to point out again, references is title, case heading, centered, bolded, on point. You still have the title of the paper and you still have a page number. And if we look at the third source here, there was no author, so they switched to using the title. That's why it's italics here. All right, moving on. Another fun example. I like to think they're fun. I wrote them. But here we have another example. If you want to pause the video, look at these sources, look at this page, tell me what's wrong, or tell yourselves, comment, I don't really care. Just pause the video here and take a look. All right, now that you've come back, first of all, we see that references was not bolded. Again, I'm trying to stress this because it is one of the changes from 6th to 7th edition. You want to have the word references bolded. If we look at the first example, the hanging indent was backwards. The second line and every line after the second line should be indented, not the first line. So that's what's wrong with this first arrow. And then if you were paying really close attention, you'll notice from the first example to the second example that they weren't perfectly alphabetized. There should be a way to check this on if you're using Google Docs or Word. There's a way to alphabetize your sources. Otherwise, sing the alphabet. That's what I do. Just make sure that they're all in the right order. That's always something tedious, but it's good to have, and technically you're supposed to have it if you're trying to follow a citation format. Moving on. In-text citations. So this is probably one of the more easy things to mess up from 6th to 7th edition. Again, it has a lot of small changes, so just make sure you're paying attention. So let's start with the basics. In-text citations typically have the author's last name or whatever that first word is that you use in your sources, and then comma the year it was published. When you're using a direct quote, like you're pulling exact words from the source material, you're going to want to add extra information. If you're using like a paper source, you're going to want to use a page number. If there is no page number, use chapter numbers. If there isn't chapter numbers, then leave it blank. So again, that's just for a paper source. If you're using a direct quote from an electronic source, you're going to want to use paragraph numbers if they're available. If paragraph numbers are not available, use the heading section or the name of the heading or that section. Whatever is available to you, try and use that. If you have both the heading and the paragraph numbers, use both of them. And they should just go right after the year that the source was published. If the heading is super long, you can switch to using the short title of that source as well. Just like in this example here, you're still going to want to use the author, the year it was published, then switch to the short title, and then if you have paragraph numbers, again, keep using that. And then just like 6th edition to 7th edition and like general punctuation, you want it to come after the last parenthetical. Okay, another fun example. Pause the video here and take a look at these in-text citation examples. Let me know what you think. All right, now that you've come back, for this first citation, what really had to change was that you don't need a first initial in this in-text citation, so you can get rid of that. And that's pretty much it. It is a direct quote, so you do need the page number if that's available. The second quote, you also is not a direct quote. the second citation, there was no direct quote, so you actually don't need paragraph numbers if you don't have a direct quote. You just need the author and then the year. So that's what's wrong there. All right, moving on to in-text citations and like formatting with authors. If you have one author, just list their last name, comma, the year it was published. If you have two authors, the last name of the first author, use an ampersand, and then the last name of the second author, comma, the year it was published. This is all pretty much the same from 6th edition to 7th edition. If you have 3 or more authors, list the first author's last name and then add et al, period, comma, the year the source was published. Okay, group authors is a little bit different. The first time you are citing a group author, you list the name of the source or the name of the group, and then if the group has an abbreviation, list that in brackets directly following the group's name and then comma the year it was published. But that's only the first time you cite it. Anytime you cite it after the first time, you can switch to just using that abbreviation, just like in this example here. If the group authors doesn't have an abbreviation or an acronym or whatever, just keep repeating that name, which again gets to be a bit tedious, but it's what you got to do. It'd be like that sometimes. All right, if you have anonymous authors, like I talked about before, if anonymous is directly listed on the source material, then just use that as if it were the author's last name. If there is no identified author, then you're going to be switching to titles again, like I talked about before. Just the first few words in the title, you don't actually have to use the whole title. Sometimes they get to be a bit long, so this is nice that you only have to use the first couple words. If you're citing an article, chapter, or web page, then you're going to be putting quotations around the title. So this is the difference I was talking about. If you're going to be using a source from a periodical, book, brochure, or report, then you're going to put it in italics. So that's just a little distinction to note when you're doing in-text citations. All right, pause the video here and discuss these examples. Let me know what you think is wrong. Yeah. All right, welcome back. Sorry, this was a trick example. I hope I got you. All of these are actually properly cited. The first one is a direct quotation, so you do need the paragraph. Anonymous is listed there as if it was the author's last name because that's what was available. The year is still there. Punctuation goes on the outside. The second one has 3 or more authors, so that's why it has et al. This year is still there, and there was no direct quote, so you don't need any more information than that. Same with the second one, Larry Institute. The citation with Larry Institute was a group author source, so the abbreviation or acronym is listed there, but it is still the first one, so you do have to leave it like that. And then the final source down here did not have authors, and so it went straight to using the title. And it must have been from an article or something like that that required quotations. All right, so what have you learned, or what do I hope you've learned today? Where do you go if you have a technical question? You're going to want to use Purdue OWL. You're going to want to use the APA style manual, the 7th edition. Make sure you're using the right edition because there are going to be some changes between the two. But yeah, Purdue OWL is a super, super useful source. They have a lot of examples, and they're really good. And really, if you just Google Purdue OWL and then whatever you would like help with, like if it's in-text citations, Google that too. Otherwise, I'm going to keep the link in the description of this video, so you can always go there. I also hope you've learned why APA is important. Being able to use APA properly will help not only with your organization and avoiding plagiarism, but it's actually going to help with your overall thesis writing. It's going to come across as much more organized. Like I said before, it's going to come across like you put your work in, which I hope you did, like you know what you're talking about. APA is super important, not only for thesis, but any type of research or any type of paper that requires APA as a citation format. It's super helpful to know this. It's important. That's all I can tell you. So who can help you? If you still have questions and Purdue OWL and the APA style manual is just not enough, you can always refer to a professor. I found that they are more than happy to help. You can always ask a friend as well. And not to plug, but like to plug, you can always sign up for the Writing Center. That's a great resource to get some help. They're more than happy to help with APA or any part of the writing process. Like they're there for you. I'm a fellow, so I can attest. I'm also a client. I've gone there so many times for all sorts of different things. Organization, APA, you name it, I've probably been there for it. All right. If you're looking for a copy of the APA style manual, you can usually get a copy in the bookstore. I'm also going to link a copy to the outline of the book. So like if you have some general questions, it might be there. All right. Thanks for listening. These are where I got my sources or all my information again. Yeah. Hope you have a good day and you now feel confident in your APA 7th edition skills.